Who said data storytelling is just for kids?
How would you explain XYZ to a 5-year-old? If you are able to explain it at that level, then you should be able to explain it to the business stakeholders.
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with tablet training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome to the Data Nerd podcast, everyone. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Gulrez Khan to our podcast. Gulrez is a father of 3 beautiful kids and works as a data science leader in his day job. He has almost 2 decades of experience under his belt and has a knack for turning boring numbers into captivating stories. When he's not busy working, you can find him passing on his skills to the next generation in the hopes of creating a world of data literate children. He's also an award-winning author of the book Drawing Data with Kids, a screen-free journey through the art of visualization for kids. A strong believer in the power of data literacy, Gulrez is on a mission to improve the way people make sense of data. He's known for delivering corporate workshops that are equal parts informative and entertaining. So welcome, Gulrez, to the Data Nerd podcast.
Thank you, Nisa, for having me. It's been long. I think last we met was in the Tableau conference where we thought, okay, we'll have a podcast interview. And finally, happy to be here.
Yes. We met at Tableau conference in April in San Diego.
Yeah.
And we talked about it then. Schedules haven't jived since then. I took a little bit of a break in the summer as well, but
Yeah.
now we're here and ready to get talking about this topic of storytelling with kids. And I think
Yeah.
this is a very interesting topic and different. Not a lot of people specialize in this, and so we'll talk. And I'll have some
Yeah.
questions about that for you. But before we do that, I like to ask all my guests. This being the Data Nerd podcast, I do
Mhm.
ask all my guests if you are a data nerd. And if so, when did you realize you were one?
I think I realized so to go back to like, am I a data nerd? So I live and breathe data, spent time working with data for last 20 years or so. So yes, I definitely feel that there is a data nerd in me. Now, when did I realize I'm a data nerd? As you mentioned, I'm father of 3 beautiful kids, so I spend a lot of time with them. And the time when I realize is that I'm a data geek or a data nerd is when I would read stories to them, when I think of doing some activities with them. There's always this thing which comes in the heart of my heart that, hey, can I turn this into data? The board games that we are playing together, and they come up with the scores of those board games, and I would try to visualize, okay, how would this look like in as a scatter plot, or how would it be as a different kind of graph? So that's always in the back of my mind when I am reciting my prayers. Like, I think of, okay, how can that turn into a data visualization?
Mm.
So these are some symptoms that you can think of.
So did you, well, but you have education in data, right? You're educated in data, or did you realize it only once you started experiencing or, telling stories to your kids or a lot of these things?
Yeah, so I've done computer science engineering back home in India,
Mm.
and that's where like we did lots of stuff. But again, like the main learning happened on the job. Like, I remember I was in Pune, India, and that's where like I was doing work with Microsoft and doing I think it was SQL Server 2005 at that time, and I was doing all these extraction, transform, load. So those were like a lot of interesting stuff which I was doing. But then, when you start thinking of data outside your day job, that's when you think of, okay, you are going deep into that topic.
Yeah. And that's probably when it hits you that yes, you're a data nerd. You're not just a data professional.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Good, good. No, and that's great. And that's like right on topic, right? So we're talking about um, data storytelling for kids
yeah.
specifically.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there's a lot of things that you can draw or a lot of parallels or a lot of takeaways you can take from teaching kids that you could also adopt in teaching adults as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
But talk to me about, let's talk about the kids or your book,
Hmm.
drawing data with kids, right? What inspired you to write that book?
Yeah. So someone told me that if you're looking for a book and you don't find it, write that book. So the other day, and it's been a couple of years, like I was looking into some of the books which my wife got for our kids,
Mm,
and my wife is homeschooling our kids. So she spent lots of time, like all her day and night with the kids. And then, like, I would also come and look into some of the stuff that they are learning. And then when I looked into some of those books, I thought like there is a gap. I live and breathe data all my daytime. But then when I look into the curriculum or the stuff which the kids were doing, there was not a book like that. And they would have certain topics in the maths book where they would have certain topics which are covered. But then I wanted to teach them in a different way. Like when I was learning data science, for example, I remember the first data set that I encountered was the iris data set. And though I love gardening, I love like flowers and whatnot.
mm,
But then to identify those different species of iris flower, uh, I cannot even pronounce those species name, right? So versicolor or like some other different names, right? So
mm,
I cannot even pronounce that, and I'm learning a new topic. How can I make it easier for a person who is learning a new topic for the first time? So that's when I thought, when I'm going to teach my kids about data, I want to make it really easy for them using examples from what they do in their daily stuff, like board games or the number of letters or like things the way anyone can understand. It doesn't have to be too difficult or too strange a topic. So that's number one. Number two is we have always read about Tom, Dick, and Harry, right? I was never able to identify myself in the books that I was reading.
mhm,
So when I was writing this book, I wanted to have it characters which my kids can identify. If you look into the book, the cover of the book has a hijabi girl,
mm,
and my daughter, like she's just 12, but for the last couple of years or so, watching her mom, she likes to wear a hijab like her, and my son, he likes to wear a kufi like me or anything like that's the kids, right? They
yeah.
see their parents doing certain thing and they want to do certain similar stuff. So I see like a lot of kids in our community, and they are not able to identify themselves. So that was another thing. And I come from India, right? So I also wanted to bring that story in. So there is a chapter in the book called Paratha Patterns.
Mm,
Paratha means salty pancake.
yeah.
And here, if you'll look into read that book, like you'll read that chapter, I see the kids are smiling because they are able to see, oh yes, uh, this is something which is made for breakfast at our home or we enjoy, rather than feeling okay, it's just the other stuff that people read about. So it's not just the book, but it's bringing the culture, it's bringing your own self, and
Yeah.
it's a realistic fiction. So these are stories from my daily lives with the kids that I've included in the book. So that's what like inspired, and like it's the mashup of all of those things together, converted and packaged as a book.
So a lot of interesting facts here and a lot of takeaways and a lot of questions I have. But first things first, you're making me wish for my mom's paratha now. Like, when you told me that, I'm like, and I don't live close to my mom right now. She lives like maybe 5, 6 hour drive from me. But that's what I grew up with as well, and so it reminds me of my mom's cooking too. So
Hmm.
I can definitely relate. But you talked about, you know, making the kids relate to something, right? I feel like, and so I teach data analytics as well. I teach
Hmm.
Tableau to adults.
Hmm. Hmm.
I find that I have to do the same thing with adults as well. Isn't it like a similar type of parallel in teaching kids and adults, or is it really that different?
I think it's very similar. But for some reason, when you think of adults, you think, okay, they should know it, or like you don't work that hard to make it as simple, right?
Mm,
So when you focus, especially for the kids, I remember, right? So I gave this interview at Google and I failed. But then the questions that they were asking was, how would you explain XYZ to a 5-year old? How would you explain a certain topic to your grandmother, right? If you are able to explain it at that level, then you should be able to explain it to the business stakeholders. So as you said, like there is a parallel which is there. And going back to the book, right? So my intended audience was something like for my kids from 7 to 14 is what I was thinking.
hmm
But now when I read the reviews or the readers that they reach out, they tell me that they are using it for themselves. They are using it as a beginner's thing. And there is another gentleman from Saudi Arabia. He reached out that, hey, I wanted to learn about data literacy, and I found your book really interesting, really useful because it's in a way which I can understand.
mm,
I'm seeing it from the moms who are teaching it, buying it for the kids, and they're saying it's useful for their learning. Someone said like it's like data for dummies, but even adults can understand.
Yes.
So again, not the intended audience, but then you see like another set of people coming in.
I think we underestimate kids' intelligence sometimes, and they are smarter than we think they are.
Hmm.
Did you have any background teaching before this, before you wrote this book? Are you an instructor or a teacher?
So I do a lot of corporate workshops, and I do trainings to in the universities as well. And but again, like all of that started after I became a father. I remember like I'm an introvert person. Like you remember we met at Tableau conference, and then I was not talking a lot. Uh, so that's how I am. Uh, but then like when my daughter was first daughter was 3 or 4 year old, I would tell her stories, and she was the best audience I ever had. Like she would be like listening like anything, and she would say, "Okay, what happened next? What happened next?" And this will give you a pat on your back that yes, you are doing something good. And that's when I realized maybe there is a storyteller in me, and maybe I can do more than what I'm doing right now. So I applied the same techniques for the adults at my work. And guess what?
Mm,
They've also enjoyed it. And then, like, I started doing more of talks, I started giving workshops. And so that's where, like, I started doing those things, and it's been like 10 or 12 years now, which I've been doing, and I try to teach in a similar manner to the adults as to kids. Like kids, like they come with great questions. I remember like a few weeks back I was teaching a batch of high schoolers, and they brought very good questions, and then like the participation was like another level. I cannot like distinguish much with what I'm teaching at UCLA to some high schoolers here in the Bay Area. So
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you teach kids, and then you teach adults, You see differences there, right? Um, and so the way that you teach kids might be a little bit different. And what I'm thinking about is particularly when it comes to charts and graphs, okay? Adults, for the most part, you'd expect that they understand what charts and graphs are, even if you're not a data person, right? You don't have to be a data analyst to read a chart, know or understand or read a bar chart. But kids, for the most part, they may be seeing it for the first time. And so, how do you introduce those concepts, those visuals to them? What's a bar? What's a chart? What's a graph? Or do you use different ways to engage or make it fun for them?
Yeah. So going back to your first point, that we anticipate that an adult would understand a graph or a visual or data, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a myth. I know, like, a lot of people, like, as soon as they see a graph or a math equation, they just want to move to the next page. Like, there is this inherent fear in them because of a certain memory that, hey, I'll not understand this, and I want to go past this particular topic. So I know, like, a lot of adults like that. And giving an example, like, the other day, my daughter, Parisa, like, she called me. Like, I work from home most of the time, and we are homeschooling our kids. So most of us, like, are home all the time. And I was finishing a call at work, and I came out for a sip of water, and she called me. She said, "Abu." I said, "What?" She said, "Come here." So I went, and she was on the couch, and she was reading a book called Birds of North America.
Hmm.
And I went to her, and I bent down, and I looked at what she was reading, and she was pointing at a graph.
Hmm.
And this graph was about pitch of different birds, a graph of pitch of different birds, right? And
Yeah.
with the pitch, you can identify the species of the bird. Now, that was a complicated graph, and I was scratching my head to see, okay, hoping that she doesn't ask me any question on that. And she said, "This looks like a snore graph from your book." And I don't know, like, if you have seen my book, but there
I
is a
have a copy. Yes.
okay, okay, thank you. So in that, like, the first chapter that I have is my daughter drawing a snore graph. So I have sleep apnea. I snore a lot, and while I was sleeping, like, she created this doodle of me snoring. It's going up and it's going down and like that.
Hmm.
Now, when she encountered a graph in her day life or in her thing, she was not afraid of that. Like, the parallel I'm trying to draw is, as an adult, you see some people are afraid of it because they have bad memory associated with it.
Yeah.
Now, if you do a good job as a parent or as an educator, that, hey, there was a fun memory. Like, if they see a graph and they think, oh, there was a snore graph or a sneeze graph that I created, and we all laughed as a family
Mm.
at that graph or at some data, then they'll not be afraid of it. They will embrace it, and then they'll try to understand it. So that's a pat on my back, which I think, okay, I think I've done a good job. If no one buys my book, it's okay. But my daughter is not afraid of the graphs or the data that she would see uh, as she grew up, or she would see in her books or whatever it is. So that's how, like, you make data interesting, right? So you don't go and just say, okay, there is this sales data which is there, and you just create a bar graph, or John did this, he bought these many eggs, and then, or like, just drawing a bar chart of number of chocolates or the candies, but you make it interesting.
Yeah.
The other day, like, and I'll just stop after that. So the other day, my son, like, he's 7 year old now, and he was staring at this timetable of our prayer times. Like, we pray 5 times a day, and every day, every prayer time, like, it changes with the sunrise and sunset.
Mhm.
and he was looking into it, and I asked like, what are you looking into? And he said, the morning prayer time, the fajr time, like it changes by 1 minute every day. And I thought that was interesting. So since he was already looking into that data, I said, okay, do you want to do a project? He said yes. And kids like it when you involve them with your stuff, right? If you
Yeah.
shoo them away, they'll not like it. So he said yes. And so we did that exercise. We converted that into data. We looked into the weekly data of how many minutes that the prayer time is changing. And we created some visuals. And now, like, he was happy, he was showing it to everyone. So that's how you get kids interested in any topic.
You know, the way that you were talking about how to get kids interesting is by telling stories and get them interested and excited about it, right? Kids love stories. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they love hearing stories, right? Um, and that's a great way to teach the kids. But I think that's a great way to teach adults too,
Yeah, yeah.
because when you talked about those adults who don't understand charts or graphs, why do they not understand it? Um, Maybe it wasn't presented to them in a way, visually speaking, that told a story. Maybe it was too complex. Maybe there
Mm-hmm.
was too many numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my job, what I do, I do data visualization. And so
Mm-hmm.
my job is to take the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
translate it to our stakeholders in a way that they could understand it, whether it be through visual communication, colors, shapes, sizes,
Mm-hmm.
but also telling the story so that they could
Mm-hmm.
understand it, because not everybody has that same level of data literacy. Some people
Mm-hmm.
can understand numbers and charts and graphs, some people can't. And
Mm-hmm.
so that when you were talking about the storytelling aspect, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just as applicable to adults as it is to kids,
Mm-hmm.
is it not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I'm very happy that you're doing these things like making adults data literate as well, like through your training. So thank you for your contribution over there. Uh, Now, when I think of adults, right, and I know like I was there in a conference in Phoenix and I had this book signing thing. A few people came in and I asked, like, I would normally ask, who are you taking the book for? And they would say, I'm taking it for my manager. It would be easier for me to explain it data to him after he reads this book. So we laughed, like, we had fun. But then again, like, as you said, it's not easy for everyone to understand data in the in an easier way. So it's very important. And then as you go up the chain, right, so as a data person or data analyst,
Mm.
your job is not just to create visualization. Your job is to go and move the needle. How do you move the needle? You move the needle by telling stories. Like, you want to not just have the audience understand what you're presenting, but you want to be a change agent, right? So you want, okay, the data is out there, but no one will act on it. How do you create empathy for the cause that you are trying to demonstrate? So that's where, like, I tell lots of stories. Like in my presentations, when I go to the VPs and other things, maybe let me give an example. The other day, uh, I was working on this. I work in a developer productivity group in my current job.
Mhm.
And as part of it, I was looking into the data of how much time a person, a new hire, takes to do their first commit. And I got all the data, and it's fine. I visualized it in different ways and whatnot. But then the data was always there. But how do I create empathy for it? So the way I tried to start was, and I'm surrounded by kids most of my life. So I started with the example of my 4-year-old daughter. And the thing is, we love gardening as a family. I've got 3 kids, and my wife and kids, they do a lot of gardening. So the other day, my 4-year-old She was reading this Bob book, and we were gardening, like four of us were out. And then she called, Abu, can I join you guys? I said, yes, we can use your help for harvesting. And she said, okay, all right, I'm coming. She was excited. And then she asked, okay, but where are my shoes? And I said, I don't know. Ask your mom. Mom said, I don't know. Ask your Api, which is like elder sister. Api said, I don't know. Ask your brother. So she was continuously being moved from one person to another person to another person and whatnot. And then finally, like she got her shoes and then she came out, and then she wanted to use the shovel. So the brother said, no, you cannot use the shovel. It can hurt you. And then she said, okay, let me just at least water the plant. Then the elder sister said, no, 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 you'll water too much. Like you'll kill the plants. And then she cried terribly. Like she just cannot control. She said, I cannot do anything. I want to help. I want to garden and all that stuff, but you guys are not letting me in. So then I tried to draw the parallel of how our new hires are feeling, right?
Mm,
I pulled the data from all those Slack channels where people are asking for help, and
mm,
they are moved from one Slack channel to another, that contact this team, contact this team, contact this team, right? You have got all of that data, so you showcase, hey, this is the data. And then the number, I've got this word cloud which says number one issue is around access. They are trying to do things, but then they are having all these different types of issues. So now, once you have created that empathy and you are thinking of that 4-year-old girl which is crying and she wants to help, and then you connect the data and then you say, okay, if we were able to solve these issues faster, you'll save 7 developers, full-time developers for our organization. And that makes an impact. That's when you move the audience to not just look at the numbers but act on it. So, long answer.
You know, I thought of this as you're talking. When you're talking about storytelling, it's not just about telling that story, it's about having them connect to the story emotionally.
Mm,
When you connect emotionally, like you said, like how do you empathize with them? How do you get them connected? When they connect emotionally to the story, then I think it hits them, or they can retain it better, or remember it. Think back to like stories, whether it's personal stories about, your life experiences. When you think back to them, what do you remember? It's not what happened, it's how it made you feel,
mm-hmm.
right? How those
Yep.
experiences made you feel. And then that allows you to kind of remember what happened. And so um when you're talking about storytelling, there's this emotional aspect to it as well.
Yep.
It's not just about how you tell the story, but how do you connect to the audience? Is that,
Mhm.
am I making sense here, or is that
No, I
right?
think that's how humans are. Like when we started the podcast, you mentioned kids love stories, but that's what every one of us do. Like we discount the adults. Like we go and we pay a big amount of money to watch movies. These are all stories.
All
I
stories, yeah.
remember, yeah, I remember like sometime back, I gave a talk, not sometime, like it's been many years back, I gave a talk at Microsoft. And then many years later, someone reached out and said, hey, you gave that talk, and I still remember the story that you told. And I was like amused, like, okay, this has been 5 or 7 years, and now
Mhm.
you are still remember that. There is this chief communication officer at Microsoft, and there was a storytelling summit at Microsoft, and I was giving a talk over there. So he introduced me, and then I gave a talk, and now it's been 10 years. So he wrote a post about it, and I said, you remember, like when I was just about to start to go and give my talk, my computer started running updates, Windows updates, and I was scared, and I was talking about that. And he said, I remember, like I introduced you, and then you talked about all these different types of stories, and that was one of the best presentation that he said. Like again, like he was being humble, and then generous in his
Mhm.
thing. But again, that's the power of stories, right? So we should do more of storytelling, but this is not something anyone taught me, right? I would
Well,
love like if
what,
people do that.
that was going to be my next question. How do people learn storytelling? Is there like
Yeah,
training for it, or is it just something you just learn from experience?
I think you should try it out. Like as I said, the moment I realized that I was a storyteller or I have something like that was after my daughter was born, and I would tell her stories.
Mm.
And so, if there is a good audience you see, then you think, okay, maybe I should do more of that. And now, like I'm an introvert, I keep saying that. I remember I have this kind of a stage fear,
Yeah.
and as a kid, I would shiver in front of the audience, and I still shiver. But I am more confident in my skin now. I know like it's okay to fumble, and everyone, even the best of the speakers, they would shiver a little. And everyone has got different styles. Like I have an accent, I make lots of grammatical mistakes when I am speaking, but it's okay. Like at the end of the day, it's more about connecting with the audience. And I think, Alhamdulillah, I'm able to do that. So that's what you need to do.
I'm an introvert too. It's like I hated public speaking as a kid. But like you said, you learn to overcome those fears. Actually, I think this is like you're not the first person. Like most of my guests who
Hmm.
I have on, and these are people who work in data. Most
Yeah.
of them say they're introverts, but now they speak very well. Like I think it's
Hmm.
a very common theme in the industry.
Hmm.
Introverts who get out and start speaking, and just because you're an introvert does not mean you can't be an effective speaker. I think that's a
Hmm.
misconception. It's not only
Hmm.
extroverts who are good at speaking or telling stories.
Yeah, I think we need to tell this more and more. Like
Yes,
if I look back as a 15-year-old growing up, and if someone have has told this thing that, hey, even though you're introvert, you can be a international keynote speaker, I would laugh, right? That, hey, I'm like I cannot speak in front of my parents, I cannot speak in front of my friends, but you're telling me I can be a good speaker. I think we need to tell it more. We need to tell it more to our kids. And many people, right? So many people discount themselves or disqualify themselves that, hey, I cannot do it. Like, that's not my thing. And even for the data community, right? So you mentioned some of your guests. So I think those could be the outliers. But I know like a lot of people, like the data science community, like they don't tell a lot of stories. Like we create a lot of models, we create do a lot of ETLs and whatnot. We spend
very technical work,
time.
right?
Yeah, yeah. And then when it comes to uh, showing our work, we tend to talk about all the technicalities. That hey, you know what? Got this data, and then I use this pandas, and then I use this package, and then I did this and this and this, and the audience is sleeping because you're not telling stories. So that's why you need to include them.
Why do they sleep? Because to them, it doesn't matter how you did it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
It's what's the outcome? What's the takeaway? That's what you need
yeah,
to, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of PhDs, like lots of very sharp people, like in the community out there. If you look to any conferences, right? So if you look into any data science conference and you look into the different topics that are being talked about, they'll talk about all the LLMs and all those neural network and whatnot. But how many topics are there with regards to uh, presentation, right? You need to work on that. So I think we need more speakers like that who can come and teach about this topic and improve the community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. I think it's very important, and actually, I think it's a skill set that if you, as a data professional, if you can learn that and be good at it, it will set you apart from other people. Even
Yep.
if you're not as good technically as somebody, you may be better off than them because you're able to communicate and tell a story. Yeah. No, this is, I mean, a great topic. We could keep talking about this topic. But I wanted to ask you, what's next? I know I've been following you on LinkedIn, and I think you have a website on storytelling, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I have just created a website called Drawing Data with Kids,
Mhm.
and over there, like one thing leads to another. Like I've got my book over there, and for your listeners, like maybe you can add a discount code if people want to buy
Sure.
the book directly from me.
Yeah.
They can use the discount code Baraka, BARAK, and they get the $5 off. So if you don't want to use Amazon, to use that. And again, like it's not just about the book. I'm thinking to add more resources. Like the other yesterday, last night, I was talking to someone from India, and they they sense the same thing. Like here, you and me, we are talking about the corporates and the adults and whatnot, but there the demand is more about, okay, how about the kids? How can you train the teachers, the educators? Like there are not many resources out there where which they can use. So I'm hoping to fill that gap and add more resources for the educators. Right now, like you've got different chapters that
Mhm.
I have in the book. There's this book will be a series, inshallah. So I'm writing another one. um, so there would be more and more things, and I'll cover more topics. But drawingdatawithkids.com, like that's where the website, that's where I'll keep adding resources, which parents, educators, and the beginners, like even if you are adults, like you will be able to see those stories and use those examples. So that's what's next.
That's great. So I'll put a link up to your website. I'll put the discount code as well.
Hmm.
If people want to get in touch with you, how can they connect?
Yeah, so they can either connect through my website or LinkedIn. My
Okay.
messages are open right now. Like I'm enjoying this part more and more, and if someone is also interested in trainings with regards to data storytelling for adults or for the kids, or even the storytelling in itself, I'll be happy to connect. And I'm doing few of those. I've got few more slots for the next month, so happy to help over there.
Great. No, that sounds good. I'll put all that information in the show notes for this podcast. So it was a pleasure having you on today, Gulrez. The great conversation. I hope to meet with you again. I don't know if you're going to be going to Tableau Conference again next year, will you?
I don't know, but
Yeah.
let's see.
All right. Well, hopefully we cross paths again and
Yeah.
and we speak again. But I appreciate you coming on to my podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the wonderful work that you are doing for the community. And all the best for your work.
I appreciate it, Gulrez. Thank you so much.